how you doing? Hope you're keeping well. It's time again for another look at some classic White Dwarf issues, so let's plough straight on in. And don't forget, if you like what you see, hit that like button, give us a comment, subscribe to us and hit the alerts button so that you learn when there are new videos up. There you go, that's the important professional bit done. Let's take a look at the fun bits. Okay, this is where you get to see how many crumbly bits of flock there are from making scenery all over my table. I need to get the little miniature vacuum cleaner out and give it a once over, but it's charging at the moment, so we just have to put that in the background. Right, let's start. Where should we start? 80s, 90s, 80s, 90s. Let's start in the 80s. Look at this guy. Any guesses who the artist is? I'm pretty sure. I'm just going to check. Yes, it is. It's another Chris Achilleos cover. Look at this massive baboony demon monkey chap. He's very cool. Anyone know where he's from? I haven't got a clue where he's from, but somewhere certainly a licensed cover. Here's another advert for Warhammer 2nd edition, and more on that later. Right, here we are. So yes, Gunartha is having a little, I was just realising I hadn't read this bit for this issue, but yes, Gunartha is talking about 4 lorry loads of cardboard boxes, 3 Ford Cortinas and a poster of a Klingon captain disappeared in West London. Funnily enough, the next day a full-size cardboard D7 appeared in the catacombs. Frankly, it's still hairy these days, being beamed up to the office by Gunartha every morning. Somebody is a big Star Trek fan at this time. Here is in Livingston's editorial. At the time of writing, I'm just preparing for a trip to Dallas. No, JR is not interested in being interviewed in White Dwarf. The Hobby Industry of America's annual show is there this year, and all the 1985 releases from the games and miniatures companies will be on show. Will the new year bring any new concepts in role-playing? Will the trend continue towards making role-playing games based on well-known characters? Following the trend of the games companies, the miniature companies are now making licensed Rangers character figures. For example, Lord of the Rings figures are to be made by Grenadier in the USA and by Citadel in the UK. There is also a strong rumour that a major miniatures company will be given the license to manufacture official D&D figures now that TSR have decided to stop manufacturing white metal miniatures. Who will the lucky company be? Wow, I wonder who that could have possibly been. Interesting, the letter in, was it the previous issue or a couple of issues previously, that said that D&D miniatures were an absolute debacle. Well, maybe somebody took something on board and they're going to let Citadel do it, because obviously Citadel do better miniatures than anybody else. Let's have a look at some proper content here. A place of damp and darkness, just to prove there's nothing new under the sun. You may read this article and think, oh, this is where he got his inspiration for the Norlocks from. The Norlocks, if you don't know, they're a race in the woods of rat people who live on crusty old barges in underground rivers that they've turned into a canal system running under the world. This is an article for D&D, ostensibly, but it doesn't really have to be D&D, about barge people who live in the sewers of cities and their nefarious contracts. But I actually hadn't read this prior to that. My Norlocks are influenced by Cornish smugglers and by my time living on a narrowboat and loving just narrowboating in general. So they didn't come from here, but there you go. It's just proof that things have always been done before. These guys aren't rats though, these are people, albeit people that you might not want to spend an awful lot of time with. They're rather stinky and smelly and they get delightful jobs, but this is a very nicely, it's very short, but this is a very nicely laid out synopsis of their lifestyle and how you might feature them in an adventure, written by Garth Nix. And yes, that is Garth Nix of Sabriel, Lyriel, Abhorsen in the 90s. 10 years earlier he was doing writing bits and pieces for White Dwarf, and I think it pops up every now and again. This was in fact a year or 2 years before his first published children's books, so it may be his first published work appeared in White Dwarf, who knows. Rune Wright is talking about some more Celtic mythos rune spells. So I mean, I'm a big fan of Celtic stuff, and I guess that works fine in RuneQuest because it's sort of Bronze Agey stuff. But yeah, I mean, they're just spells, spells with other names. Not particularly exciting. Part 2 of the Dark Usurper adventure that I said maybe we were going to try, and then I didn't have time to do it. But maybe keep reminding me if it's something you want to see, and I will go back to it and we'll play the adventure. Thrud the Barbarian does not appear in this episode of Thrud the Barbarian, but these couple have returned to their home city in the middle of winter after a long time away to find that it's a derelict ruin. Now, why is it a derelict ruin? Yes, Thrud is to blame, but I like the nice little bit of Thruddish graffiti down in the bottom corner here. The sad story of a city and Thrud. Travellers continues its Star Wars spoof with its rather unimpressive Chewbacca who has a big mouth and can roar. Parrying rules in AD&D. Should you be particularly interested in how to make parrying more authentic in D&D, there you go. Now you can. The Androx Diaries continues its saga. I'm not going to read this one. This after a brief spell of being quite interesting and feeling like it was getting into its stride, I think this one is not wonderfully written or exciting, but maybe I'm doing it a disservice. It's worth a read. This is an account of Androx, who's on his way. You may remember from previous editions. He's on his way to a college of wizardry, and this is his adventure in the caravan. It feels like it might have drawn very heavily on the caravan campaign module thing that was in a previous issue of White Dwarf. It's got very much the same feel to it. Stuff that happens among the travellers. Yeah, maybe it's worth a read, but it's not high literature still. However, an alien werewolf in London. This is fun. So this is a traveller scenario, but this is a traveller scenario where people have to go back in time to find a shape-shifting alien that is having its merry way in Victorian London. And I actually wonder, not having played Traveller, but I wonder whether this would be interesting played the other way round as maybe a Call of Cthulhu or a Gumshoe scenario, or even I don't know, playing with one of the other rule sets, but set in Victorian London so that you don't have the advantage of knowing the stuff that the people who are travelling through time know about what they're facing. Try and spin it as a straight Jack the Ripper scenario and then slowly reveal the nature of it. But this is interesting because it catapults the players back into the past to try and find the beast, but in true time traveller trope fashion, their little time travel devices suffer a mishap and no longer function when they get there, so they can't get back until they've managed to cobble together, using Victorian science, a way of fixing their devices. It's fun and it's pretty thorough. I mean, this is a good long article with a nice lot of maps, and I'm sure you could use regular Victorian maps of London if you wanted to. Yeah, it has a nice feel to it. Manufacture of magic items in AD&D Part 4, swords and other weapons. So continuing the development of magic items. This talks a little bit about forging swords. It does at least point out that in order to have a decent magical sword, you first of all got to have a decent sword and the things that are required for forging a decent sword. So that's good. It's not something that necessarily everyone goes into, and then it basically gives a few types of magical sword with which most of us will be familiar by now. Fiend Factory dedicates its 2 lovely green pages here to an adventure which is rooted around a few new characters or new types of creature. We've had lots of new types of creature from Fiend Factory, but actually this one at least puts them in a setting, gives them some use. It's not just something else for the DM to have in his little book of horrors. this does give a way of using them in game and sets them in a scenario, so that's fun. They're sort of foresty, elfy type people. You'll be able to see on the screen there's some amazing artwork here. Love this black and white artwork. Unfortunately, it makes the text completely indecipherable. Look at this. Hermits and Hags. This is a treasure chest article, which you can just about read up the top here, and it's about, yeah, people who take themselves off and live at a distance for one reason or another and have a little bit of magical capability, and it's a really nice article. It's just a shame that they felt the need to stick this picture of a wizard over the whole back of it, meaning that you can't really read it without your eyes going funny. Oh well, never mind. Crawling Chaos brings out some Call of Cthulhu creatures. They're alright, they're not anything that you wouldn't expect if you'd read a bit of Lovecraft. Tabletop Heroes here is talking about painting faces. Interesting, considering that there are no photographs of faces, I guess because the heads of miniatures are too small, but it's nice that it has this illustration showing where highlights and things should go, and it talks about some suggested colours, largely for doing, you know, white Aryan skin tones. Doesn't talk an awful lot about doing other nationalities, skin tones, or even particularly varying their white recipe, but at least, you know, they give you a recipe. And then there's some nice pictures over this side, and it credits down the bottom here the people who are taking the photographs. So there you go, previous letter page that said you need to tell us who's taking the photographs. You can see that some of these are Joe Deaver and Gary Chalk, and some of these are Andy Wales, Steve Williams and Joe Deaver. So there you go. Those are the people taking these photos. Now these, up the top, these Oriental characters painted by John Blanche, I have to admit, it's something of a heresy, but I'm not a big fan of John Blanche's miniatures paintings. Quite a lot of his actual paintings I like. I'm not a big fan of this style. I find it lacks finesse, which seems wrong and bad to say, especially when it's got all the little he uses pen quite a lot to do all the little checkers and things on them, lots of detailing in them, but it just generally feels like it's loads of washes, which is good for throwing the texture down, I guess, but it also makes them really glossy. There's something about it I don't like. It's very artistic, but it's not a style that I particularly like. Some Vietnam figures. There you go, something a bit different to stick in White Dwarf. And I said we were going to come back to Warhammer later. Well, if you believe the fluff here, the writing rather, the article, this is a playtest game of Warhammer Fantasy Battles 2nd edition. I don't think it is. That looks like a very set up diorama to me, especially with the magic blast going on here, but it's a very cool setup. And in fact, I meant to ask Mike, and Mike will be watching, so Mike, being an expert in figures, will be able to identify every single figure in this diorama. It does say that this was photographed by Andy Wales, Steve Williams and Joe Deaver, so we know that Mike is a big fan of the Joe Deaver collection and will probably recognise a few things in here, but these figures look a lot more drab and the banners don't look quite right for figures from the Joe Deaver collection, so I don't imagine that they are those, but it does, at least in the article, it defines them as being Chronicle, Citadel, Aesgard and Essex, but that makes up the bulk. It doesn't say there aren't other things hiding in here as well, and it's great fun with these little dioramas to try and place as much as possible. The castle is very cool. I think maybe it would be better if the background had a bit of castle in it. It very much looks like a castle on the edge of a precipice here, so they're defending a good couple of feet before it drops off a cliff behind the back there, but it's a very cool castle building built out of card and polystyrene, apparently. Let's see what else we've got here. We've got some letters. We've got Gobbledygook, of course, securing lightning quick speeds for his master and getting suitably rewarded for it. And talisman advert on the back. There we go, 1985 White Dwarf issue 62, and that's a point rather. I have been naming these videos by the month and the year that they came out. Should I include the issue? Is the issue number important to people? We're in issue 62 here. We're going to jump ahead to issue 182. So this is White Dwarf from 1995, February 1995. Where everything is very bright and colourful as always. We've got some dwarves and some orcs, and the then relatively new Catachan jungle fighters with the Blood Axe Commandos here. Oh, incidentally, I flicked past the cover. How dare I flick past this beautiful Mark Gibbons illustration. This is actually one of the illustrations that I am most familiar with. It's one of the first 40k illustrations that I came across. I think it was on one of those little collecting Citadel Miniatures leaflets that you used to get folded in the back of blister packs. And what a brilliant guy. I was always sad that there wasn't a miniature. Now there is a miniature. I'm not going to acquire it because it's one of those horrible digital nasty yuck sculpts, but it does a fairly good job actually for a nasty yuck digital sculpt. It does a pretty good job of approximating this guy. I still think I would rather convert one. Maybe I will do that when I get onto painting some sci-fi 40k stuff after all my fancy armies are finished. We'll see if I have time then. Games Workshop want an assistant to the print buyer. Do you want to help Games Workshop buy prints? Then perhaps you should. And we're warning you right now that from the next issue, White Dwarf will cost an extra 25p per copy. 25p you say, but actually this is £2.25. So that's a 10% increase in the price of White Dwarf from next month. Going to go up to £2.50, which I think was the price it was when I first started collecting it. So there you go. Here's a little snippet preview of what's to come, just tantalising down here, talking about amazing chaosy conversions. I think this is about as close to that as it came at the time. Mike McVeigh's Emperor and Horus diorama, his Horus from it, and that's coming up in a future episode, how he managed to convert that. Newly released this month, Cadian Shock Troops. The things that were to become the standard Imperial Guard, standard Astra Militaris, if you follow the new thing. Yes, Cadian Shock Troops are where it's at. That's where they decided to go. They're a sort of blend of Colonial Marines from Alien and the guys from Predator, and just regular army guys with a little bit of the Space Marine Scouts thrown in. Mishmashy. Rick Priestley talks about Arcane Magic, the supplement that includes all of the magic items from the various army books released at the time, and spells of course, plus a bunch of extra spells that are designed to try and moderate the effects of such powerful spells that have been brought out since the issue of power creep happening in the rules, and this being designed to address that. So that's not a new problem. Lots of games have had to face that through the years. The mega sale is on. You can get Doom of the Eldar here for £5. I was at a show at the weekend and somebody was trying to pass off a Doom of the Eldar with no miniatures in it for £160. Woo, 160, ridiculous. And he also had a Man of War for sale, I think also for 160 with no miniatures in it and actually no rulebook in it either. So just the box and the templates. People are charging crazy things. They were still there at the end of the day, they didn't sell them. Orc Mega Guardians. We like an Orc Mega Guardian, right? Crazy orky things. So bright, so vibrant, so stomping around on the table, shooting things. Actually pretty big. You know, a lot of things, when I saw them in White Dwarf, I imagined them bigger than they actually were. Mega Guardians are actually quite large. And so we've had all of the epic stuff on how to make the most use of your Titans. This is how to make the most use of your Mega Gargants. Gargants or Gargants? I guess Gargants, like Gargantuan, that's Gargant. Anyway, never mind. Also at the show at the weekend, they had a guy who was, actually they had lots of guys with their Titans, the Titan Owners Club you may be familiar with all of their big Forge World 40k Titans, obscene amounts of money on the floor stomping around, that somebody had, I believe, scratch built. I'll be disappointed if it was 3D printed, but maybe it was. Somebody had scratch built an Imperator Titan, which was very much looking like this. It was a stonking great thing, about the height of a person, as a proper Titan in 40k should be. I have no idea how he moves it around, but it looked amazing. Here are some, here is some fluff and rules for Commissar Yarrick. Also in the news at the moment, because of course they've released a new Commissar Yarrick model, which of course is nothing like as good as the old one, right? With his ridiculous rules about how he tore a power claw off and got it mounted on his fist, and but it's fun. He's a fun character, and although you may say, yes, as a Jez Goodwin sculpt of course it's good, or you may say, it's static and flat and it looks really boring, I think there's something very grand about it, and I like that he has the orc skeleton around his bolter. That's pretty cool. Apologies by the way if you can hear the noisy teens, the noisy kids in the background. It's about school kicking out time, so of course they're all being noisy in the background. Hooray for living around the corner from a school, right? This is one of my least favourite times of the day. Never mind. We're in Blood Bowl. You know my feelings on Blood Bowl, but actually look at this guy. This guy was in the Mike McVeigh Warhammer Quest diorama, which we're not far from. It's exciting, isn't it? Probably, I say we're not far, we're like 8 months away from, but still exciting. So yeah, this guy, I still think this is one of the best Minotaurs ever sculpted. I think this is like epitome of Minotaurism, and I would have this Minotaur just in a fantasy army, never mind Blood Bowl. I think he's brilliant with his little punch dagger, maybe giving him an axe in his other fist. I think it's best Minotaur. This is a Q&A about Blood Bowl. Fantastic. Here's a box set of Space Marine Terminators. That classic box set, yes. There was a time when that was new, when there weren't a million of them in circulation. We can't leave Epic without having some discussion about Titans, Imperial Titans that is. So here we're talking about knight households. We took a look at some knights. They were new out last month, some more out this month. I still think that the plastic paladins are some of my favourite of the knight figures. Speaking of things that were new once, Space Marine Dreadnoughts. Look at this guy, look at this venerable design here that was so different from the Rogue Trader Space Marine Dreadnought, which I've got in a box somewhere. I'm not going to get him out right now, but this big square box with some kind of vaguely, I guess, sarcophagus-like structure on the front is what it's supposed to be, and his massive punchy fist that can go up and down, but if you move a couple of feet to the side he can't hit you with it, and something shooty on the other side. I mean, I'm not sure who designed it. I'm not sure I find it very threatening as a design, but it's definitely iconic, right? You would definitely know one if you saw one. Plague Barracks of Nurgle, Demonettes and Steeds of Slanesh were released. Have a fond spot for the models of this era. People will say, the earlier Bloodthirsters, the earlier Demonettes, or the latter, is it Juan Diaz, is that the name? They are a lot more popular, I guess, because they're more sort of classically attractive models that just happen to have claws on as well, but sort of sinuous, sensuous claws. These ones have ridiculous oversized claws, and are a bit more, I guess, like the ones previous that were sort of quite bestial looking and had very crabbish, lobsterish looking appendages. These ones have got a bit more of a sort of I don't know, they've got their elongated feet, a bit more of a kind of doggish look to them, I guess, but very alien heads. Yeah, painted in obviously the pastel colours of Slaanesh, because you would. And a battle report, which is obviously going to be Ultramarines, including the Dreadnought and the Terminators and the Rough Riders from a couple of a couple of issues previously, and some Cadian shock troops and Yarrick and some Kazakhstan jungle fighters. So all of the newly released stuff. Excellent news, well done Games Workshop for putting all of the newly released stuff into this battle report. Of course it was a battle report that was fought while they were play testing the Imperial Guard book, so that's why. It's definitely not so that you see all these new cool things doing what they want to do and buy them. And on the other side, we've got some older orcs here. We've still got the Scorcher and the war bikes that are older things, but the Ball Boys were out quite recently. The Bad Moon Knobs came out in this edition, so yeah, there's some new stuff in there as well. But yes, of course, we're Ultramarines and Orcs, right? Because that's the ultimate combination. However, what's really exciting about this battle report is this. Take a look here. In fact, we can credit the person who created this, Owen Branham. If you're listening, even if you're not, well done. Look, you get sort of little snatches of it here. You can't really see it in all of its glory in the pictures here, but look at this. Look at this amazing landing pad thing here that dominates the field. It's just superb. I guess this is all plasticard struts under here because we're a long way off the Necromunda bulkheads coming out that are going to make this kind of thing so easy to build. So I would guess this is all plasticard, but they did take moulds and cast bits that people had created, so I would not be surprised if that was one bit that had been moulded and cast several times. It's certainly how I would do it if I was building this, but it's just an incredible structure, the kind of thing that you've really got to have a studio to be able to fit it in. This goes, interestingly, this goes from Orcs having it all their own way to a massive swing to the Ultramarines right at the end by denying the Orcs points. Adrian Warlord Wood up here has a bit of a moan that it's down to the use of 2 strategy cards that the Ultramarines have managed to snatch this massive victory from Ghazghkull Thraka. Although the Ultramarine player who should know this, should have looked at this earlier. Is it Jervis? No, Jake Thornton. There you go. Jake Thornton is playing the Ultramarines. He does make a point of saying, if I hadn't had those cards, the Assault Marines would have been able to do it anyway. So boo shucks. And another reason why you should buy Assault Marines, because they will do the job for you. Here are those Bad Moon Knobs. Look, I used to think as a 12-year-old boy that Bad Moon Knob was a hilarious name. I guess the people who came up with them also thought that was a hilarious name. Knobs as in nobles, of course, but that's not really the interpretation that I put on them. I do love these models. They are fabulous. Some Imperial Guard, the Terminators, Rubbish Silas, Born of Chaos, as we've mentioned previously, Flames of Siege, Demonettes, Bloodletters. Again, I really like these Bloodletters. The much more hunched sort of animal ones of the previous edition are really cool and really demonic. But they're multi-part models, and so they always fall apart, or you can't ever really make them look like they're one piece unless you do loads of sculpting around them. So I'm much more of a fan of single part models, and I think these preserve the elongated heads quite nicely. But yeah, they're slightly less alien and more human looking. Epic Imperial, Epic Chaos, Epic Orcs, and there's that wonderful Blood Bowl Minotaur Nashrak Black Hoof. Yeah. And the advert on the back is Epic, is Orcs versus Imperials, of course. lovely bright colours, and I like the backdrop here is nice, the winding river valley. They've got that sort of blended into the foreground quite nicely with this big imperial monument here, and the rock faces on the other side. That's lovely. I would not be surprised if that was a John Blanche illustration, but who knows? If anyone knows, tell me, because it'd be fun to know who did the background paintings for these. There we go. February 1985 and 1995. I hope you enjoyed that very quick run through. I shall be back next month for some more White Dwarfs and hopefully get a few more videos up in the meantime talking about some other things. Join me next time. Take care, and I shall see you again.